I want to thank the organizers for the kind invitation to present the Synthetic Forager project to this overwhelming audience. So the Synthetic Forager project started now 2 years back, and we are coordinating this project here at Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona. I'm Paul Verschure, the coordinator, with the Catalan Institute for Advanced Studies, and with a number of people in my group who will also be presenting parts of the project later. We have engaged in the Synthetic Forager project, where we actually try to understand how animals, in particular rodents, are so capable in solving problems optimally. And it's not only that we want to understand how they do it, we want to also express this understanding in a new kind of artifacts, robots that have similar kinds of problem-solving capabilities. So the Synthetic Forager project has as its overarching goal to identify the underlying neural, cognitive and behavioral principles of optimal foraging in rodents, and then to implement these in a real-world foraging artifact. So if you want, we want to go from the rat, the left-hand side, to the rat at the right-hand side, so that the small rat at the bottom will be amazed. So just as an example, why we picked rodents, why are rodents so interesting? We can look at this bit phenomenological sketch from a recent issue of Nature, where these researchers were confronted with a very specific problem in New Zealand, where actually a single Norwegian rat had escaped from one island and had swam to another island. And because people, of course, very concerned about the invasion of new species in these kinds of ecosystems, there was a great determination to actually capture this rat. Well, a large range of methods were tried, but in the end it took humans who were really dedicated to solve this task. It took humans about 18 weeks to catch this rat on this fairly small island. And what this illustrates in a sort of rather intuitive way, we can say, is the incredible skills that rodents have in exploring new environments, and also to remain in some sense hidden in these environments and exploit them for survival. And this is exactly what we try to understand in this Synthetic Forager project, although we don't want our robots to stay hidden as well as this rat. So how are we going to get there? How are we going to build this rodent artifact, this optimal foraging artifact? So on the one hand, left-hand side, it's theory, right? We have a model, we have a theory that is trying to give us a set of hints about what the key functional principles could be of such a brain. I will describe these later in a bit more detail, but these hypotheses on function that come out of a tradition of work that we have started in SPECS more than 20 years ago constitute the very explicit hypothesis we're testing in this project. Okay, so we have a set of hypotheses on how the organization of the nervous system at different levels of the neuraxis contributes to optimal foraging. So then another important aspect is the brain itself. We want to test these hypotheses with respect to the rodent brain. We want to do that by actually building a rodent mixed reality environment where we have a rat that uses telemetry to exchange signals with the outside world, like its physiological state. But then given the physiological state of the animal, we want to be able to also manipulate this environment, so that in this way we can more specifically probe the responses to the nervous system of this rodent to specific properties of its world, so that we can have a more explicit way to test the predictive capabilities of such an animal and to what extent its brain is dedicated to, let's say, finding optimal solutions in complex, unstructured and unpredictable environments. Now in the end, the brain research combined with the so-called Rabams environment, which is sort of the rat mixed reality environment, this will be translated to a roving robot, a foraging robot, that where the rodent is used for foraging, we see this robot being used in a robot equivalent task of humanitarian demining, which we see it as a robot version of foraging. So the different partners in the project contribute to these different aspects. So we have Pompeu Fabra and University of Osnabrück contributing very strongly to the theoretical agenda and also to the data analysis of the project. University of Amsterdam, University of Tel Aviv, and IDIBAPS, which is also here in Barcelona, contributing to the experimental neuroscience agenda of the project. An SME, a French SME, Robosoft, developing a new kind of robot platform that will be able to exist in outdoor environments 24/7, so 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in a continuous duty cycle using also autonomous recharging and so on. And then UPF together with GTEC realizing this fully integrated rodent mixed reality environment. So let's see concretely what this means in case of the synthetic foraging project. This is an example of the experiments that the University of Tel Aviv is running. Here we have a rodent who is hoarding. So this animal will have a home base in its environment, the right upper corner, where it likes to stay. It spends a lot of time here. The lower left corner, it has food. Dependent on the size of these food pellets, the animal will either bring them home where they're large or consume them on the spot when they're small. But now for this animal to do this, it actually has to know quite some things. It has to know the layout of its environment. It has to memorize this. And also, of course, it must make assessments continuously of the threat level of its environment, how secure it can be, or under how much threat it is by predators and so on. And on the other hand, it must have a sense of what its own needs are. To what extent does it have any needs to fulfill, like feeding? So this is the typical paradigm that we try to understand, the rodent paradigm we try to understand as a test case of optimal decision making in rodents. However, if we look at what brains can do in general, it goes of course way beyond what we can observe in these more constrained hoarding situations. So if we here look at the upper two clips, where we see on the one hand the amazing navigation skills of humans in traffic in India, where we see sort of split-second decision making in the service of survival, which humans apparently are very good at. At the right upper corner, we see another kind of complex, unstructured environment in which humans excel, which is social interaction. So what this means is that within our project, we believe that although a lot of the problems we study maybe are mainly defined in space, behavior in space, as the hoarding case, we do believe that the same principles will generalize to these more complex rule-like interactions we might observe in social interactions. Which in the end, of course, can also be generalized to virtual environments. And this is then illustrated at the lower left corner. In the end, we hope to see this also expressed in our robots so that the lady we see up here in the end will be as attentive and flirtatious with our robots as she is now with one of our co-workers. And if you want, this is our theory. So on the one hand, we have the brain. The brain is a complex organ. It's fair to say we have actually not a really good idea how it works and why it works so well the way it does. But the starting point of our theory is to say, like, well, although brains might vary in their complexity over phylogeny, maybe there are a finite set of underlying principles. And it's these principles we should try to capture. And in this distributed adaptive control program that we have developed, or this architecture that we have in mind, what we're saying is that we should keep in mind, or what we're proposing as a hypothesis, is that the brain in the service of optimal decision making is actually integrating 3 levels of organization. On the one hand, a level we call reactive, which you can think of as more, let's say, a brainstem level organization, where we have predefined reactive behaviors that allow you to, let's say, sustain yourself in minimally complex environments that are fairly predictable. But still, they will allow you to feed, to fight, to flight, etc. So these are predefined reactive behaviors that in some sense constitute a big chunk of our brainstem and more primitive centers of the brain. However, and this is then an aspect that DAC elaborates quite a bit, and that makes it also interesting, the reactive layer is not only driving behaviors and helping you to survive, it also generates very critical signals for learning. Because you could argue, as soon as any of these reflexes is triggered, something important has happened in the world. And this is, if you want, and also a way in which we think in this architecture about very standard paradigms of learning, like classical conditioning, where we would say, well, unconditioned stimuli that are driving such a reactive layer are generating important learning signals for what we call the adaptive layer, at which level I would like to identify the stimuli in the world that are relevant to me. I want to learn about properties of the world and how they are predictive to my internal states. And also I want to shape my actions to them. So in some sense, the intuition is at the adaptive layer, I learn to label my world. I learn to say these are chairs, and these chairs have some relevance to my existence, and I can have a certain set of actions now optimally tuned to chairs. All right, so I have a labeled world, and I have shaped my actions to them.